This video, we're going to look at QString. So take out the letter Q. Really what we're talking about here is just a string. This is Qt's universal string class, and this thing is, well, amazing. If you ever had to work with raw strings before, they are frustrating. QString makes it ridiculously simple. You don't even have to include anything because it's baked right into Qcore. So I'm going to just simply say QString, and let's say name, and then type whatever your name is. We've done this before. We've been doing this throughout this whole course. That's how simple it is. Now I'm going to say QInfo, and of course, let's just print this out. Go ahead and run this. Now, the really cool thing about this is QInfo is smart enough to say, hey, this is a QString, so it's going to put quotes around it. So whenever you see something in quotes, 99% of the time, it's a QString. Let's go ahead and close that. Makes it ridiculously simple to work with. Now, let's just play around with this a little bit. We're going to grab this, and I'm going to say, I want to know what's within a range, but it's actually called mid. And it's got a starting position, so I'm just going to say 1, and an ending position, I'll say 3. Now, this is a 0-based array. So 0, 1, so the letter R, and then 2, 3, and so on and so on. So let's see what mid returns between 1 and 3. RYA. And of course, if your name is different, it will be different. And if your name was much shorter than that, then you may have had other issues. So let's just demonstrate what would happen if it was shorter. Notice how it automatically trims it out. It just goes right to the end, and there's no error, no crash, nothing bad like that. So now that we've got that, let's try inserting something. So because we know this is basically just a 0-based index or 0-based array, let's go ahead and say, you know what? Dot, and then insert. We have a position, and I'm going to say 0, which is the very beginning, and then I want to just insert another string. Now you have some options here. You can do byte arrays, const char pointers, QStrings, string views, and things like that. So what do we want to put? Well, depending on who you are, just do something like this. I'm going to put Mr. and space. Doesn't really matter. Just make sure there's a space at the end here for this next little example. Let's save run, and let's see what that looks like here. So now it's going to be Mr. Brian Cairns. I feel really weird when people call me Mr. I feel like really old. I don't know why, but anyways, let's go ahead and grab this. And now I want to split that up. So what split does is you can take a character of some kind, and I'm going to use the space, and it will return different strings. So it's going to read through that thing and split it up, a lot like splitting up firewood. So now it's going to return a Q list, something we haven't really talked about in depth, but just ignore the letter Q. We're talking about a list of Q strings. So there's Mr., Brian, and Karen. So we've got 3 distinct different strings here. Notice how the space is magically gone. That is, well, actually pretty darn cool. You can do some sophisticated things with QString with very, very little effort. So let's say we want to find the position of, or the index within that little array. It's actually a list, but let's see if we want to find the position of it. So I'm going to say int. Let's call this index equals, and we want to do the name dot index of, and we need to tell it what we're looking for. Now, index of is a little bit funny. If we press F1 on here, you can see how it's going to do a Q type size, and this is what is a little bit confusing. Returns the index position of the first occurrence of the string, searching forward from the index position from returns -1 if not found. What does all that mean? You can actually define, and of course they've got documentation on how to do it right here. You can define where to even start, but it's going to return the position or -1 if not found. You can also do case sensitivity and all of this other stuff. It's all baked right into the documentation, so I'm not going to spend hours and hours talking about it. All of this information is literally right at your fingertips. So now I can just simply say, if index greater than -1, then I can go ahead and do something with that. So I'm going to say QInfo And I want to do name.remove. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say we want to remove from the starting position 0 to where we found it +1. The +1 is the length of the space here. So I'm just going to chop out this Mr. dot and then space. And just because I'm not sure if I'm really good at math, I'm not sure if a space is 1 character or 1,000, I'm going to say, you know what? Just to be safe, let's just do trims. So what trim's going to do is just take a knife to it and trim off all that white space. White space are non-printable characters. Go ahead, save, run, see what this looks like here. And sure enough, it's converted it back to Brian Cairns. Very, very cool. And if we omit this +1, you'll see it says dot space Brian Cairns. So now we've got this little guy here. So, yes, I did make a mistake. And the mistake was that I forgot we were looking for the period, not the space. This is the tricky part of index of. Sometimes you can deceive yourself. Now, if I were looking for just the space, what is it going to do? It's going to jump that ahead because it's going to stop where it found it. And instead, it will jump over here. Seems a little confusing till you run it and then you see it in action. And voila. The space is not there because, you guessed it, we use this little trimmed right here. That is extremely cool, extremely powerful. Now what we can do is something like this. We can just say QString title equal teacher. Let's get some screen real estate here. And we can make more QStrings here. So we can say QString full, and full is going to be the name plus. We're just going to concatenate or add those together. So we're literally just taking 2 different QStrings, technically 3, and adding them all together. And then we can just simply say QInfo and print that out. There you go. Now you notice we've got this little guy back here again, so that's a problem. What we can do now is trim that. So save, run, and it strips it out before adding it all together. That is, well, beyond powerful compared to other things that you've probably worked with. So then go QInfo and 2. You notice how when you type the word 2, you can actually convert this to a lot of different things. And obviously consult the documentation for what you want, but there is a number of things you can do. Now, one thing that I like to do is to UTF-8. Why? Because most of the world is running on UTF-8. If you don't know what that is, UTF is a representation of data. So we used to have ASCII, and then we moved to UTF-8. There's also other higher versions of that. And basically, this is like, when you talk about UTF, you're talking about every printable character in the known universe. This is extremely powerful, so now you can support other languages. It's baked right into Qt. So if you had Japanese or Korean characters or something like that, they would be baked right in there. Now, last thing before we wrap this up, we're going to make a function. And we're just going to simply say QInfo name. Notice what we're doing here. We have something that starts with a Q, and we're making a copy. And I'm going to put that right here. You may be screaming, no, wait, you can't copy. Well, QString is not a Q object. It's really not. So you can copy that to your heart's content. Now let's go ahead and do the full. And just demonstrate. Notice how we don't get any warnings, we don't get any issues, we can just save and run, and it works as expected. Major takeaway here is that QString is, well, extremely powerful. It has UTF baked right into it, and it's the universal string class for Qt. You can do all sorts of string manipulation, and it's actually very quick. And you can copy it. It gets way, way more complex than that because it is the universal string class. As you can imagine, the documentation for this is, well, staggering. There's a lot of documentation here. But 9 times out of 10, if you're looking to figure out how to do something, just scroll all the way down into the detailed description, read about it, and then you can actually get some source code examples baked right in the documentation on how to do pretty much just about everything.